wedding photographers of Reddit. What was your "they're not gonna last long" moment? I'm a videographer, and the groom called me a couple days after the wedding. He wanted me to make sure I didn't include any footage of him checking out the women at the wedding. While shooting video, I attached a microphone to the groom for audio and proceeded to prepare for the ceremony. Just as I was about to adjust my audio settings, the groom stepped into another room with a friend. As I put on my headphones, I overheard the groom confiding in his friend, describing the wedding as a wedding of convenience and reassuring them not to be concerned about what would happen in their relationship. I know two people who had a wedding of convenience. He's gay, she's a lesbian. Their parents are Chinese, immigrants to the USA on one side, still in China on the other. They have a marriage that makes their parents happy. They're really good friends, roommates, and they do what they want on the side. It works, but the logistics must be. I mean, it's pretty much the same as having a roommate, right, but better. Roommates with non-sexual benefits. Roommates with tax benefits. I did a wedding for an acquaintance and her husband. Day goes great. I'm really happy with almost everything I took. Everyone was feeling it and having fun. But, and this is one of the reasons I quit photography, the bride sees some of the photography. The bride sees some of the photos I had sent her and immediately is calling me. "I need you to do the editing magic and make me look skinny," John was saying. I was going to look too fat in my dress and wanted me to lose weight, but I knew you could just edit it. So, I didn't. So I have to explain, this is like 2010. I can only Photoshop so much. I can make you look a tad slimmer in certain photos without making it noticeable. But I can't do it to all of them. And if I was to, the editing would be noticeable, and I will have to charge you a lot of money to edit you in all the photos. She tried to convince me to edit hundreds of photos for a couple $100, and I have other jobs going, and had given them a great deal already, so explained I couldn't. So she insists I do at least some of her main pics. I tell her when people see the rest of the pics, they will see the difference. She didn't care and insisted more. So I do, and a couple weeks later, when I thought it was all done, and history calls me and leaves me a voicemail of how I ruined her wedding. Her new husband is upset at how she looks in the pics and keeps making remarks about her wig. So it didn't seem like they were in a great place from the get-go. Bride looked visibly miserable the entire ceremony. While photographing the men's getting ready portion, the groom repeatedly kept joking about killing himself. During the toast, the bride ran off to the bathroom for about 30 minutes and came back wiping her tears with her eyes red and puffy. Neither of them had any chemistry at all. It made no sense why they were together to me. That was the last wedding I shot. In another life, I worked catering shifts. Loads of Saturday weddings. I'll never forget the best man's toast to the groom. It was a shameless roast. He spoke openly about the groom's willingness to shag anything when he's drunk. He then went on and on about the groom's deadly gambling habit and his short fuse when he doesn't win. He asked the stone-faced groom, "How many thousands of dollars in golf clubs have you destroyed or lost in countless ponds?" Nobody was laughing. The bride had tears in her eyes, and the groom's parents sat in stunned silence. Hope he warned the bride of all this before the wedding too. Went to one of the most awkward best man speeches ever. Couple still very much together, but the best man ruined their wedding. Stories told. Bride had cheated with her ex-husband, with new husband. That wasn't broadly known. Husband took a shit in the backyard cause he needed to countless husband stories of being a horrible person as a late teen. Like ordering multiple soft serves from McDonald's and then throwing them at the poor girls that served them. Only thing that wasn't shared was that the husband had slept with the bride's sister a year or two before he had hooked up with her, an untold story to this day. Went for a solid 10 minutes. Bride holding back tears. Utter muppets doing that speech. And went to a wedding during college to my friends that got married, who graduated 2 years prior to me. They had a beautiful wedding on a boat off the Keys, and as the best man gave his speech, he was really drunk by this point, just shouted out, "You don't deserve her. You literally got a blowjob from a stripper. No make that two stripper. No make that two strippers at your bachelor party. Peace out." He dropped the mic and tried to do a dramatic exit, but by this point, we were all stuck on this boat in the middle of the ocean. It took an hour to get back to port, and it was the most awful and awkward hour of our lives for everyone on that boat. Do go on. Wait, you can't leave it there. Did they still get married? Because earlier in your comment you said they got married. They got married first on the beach, and the reception was on the boat after, so yeah, they got married. I'm pretty sure they tried to work it out for like a few weeks after the wedding, but by then it came out he had cheated a lot. Yikes. Cheating is some people's hobby. It seems mad to me, like even seeing aside all the cruelty and heartlessness. When I hear about some people having affairs, I just think, how do they find the time for that? I couldn't imagine coming up with a bunch of constant bullshit to justify my absence. But also, how would I do my hobbies and also work and also see friends on top of that? Said this before. Third wedding and the best man, the groom's brother, starts his speech. Well, welcome back everyone. Good to see some new faces and some old ones. At his third wedding, my uncle's best man started his speech with, "I told you buying my suit would be cheaper than renting." He got his third divorce after about 6 months, which to be honest was longer than we expected because we all saw it coming like the steamroller security guard from Austin Powers. The engagement session. The couple was in from out of town because she had just taken the bar exam to become a lawyer. At the end of the session, I gave them a prompt to share with each other what they were proud of each other for. He couldn't think of a single thing. Somehow they still got married, complete with the groom drinking 11 eye-purses several shots before the ceremony, mother of the bride so drunk for family photos she pretended to strip, and the groom and all the groomsmen wearing camo hats with neon orange letters that said titties and beer for the entire wedding day, including sunset couples photos where he refused to do anything I suggested, nearly spat chew right on my feet, kept farting on purpose, and loudly complained about how all he wanted was to go have sex. Guy sounds like an animal, goddamn. I think my first clue was when the bride showed up with some bad makeup, clearly trying to cover her black eye, while most of the rest of the family seemed far more into the free food and booze than the wedding itself. Oh yeah, never paid me either. Classy people. Yikes. Any idea if she ever got out of that marriage? One of those hotel venues that can run 2 weddings at the same time. Bride from our wedding is found in a hotel room with the groomsmen from the other wedding doing coke before the first dance. End result is we got paid and told no need to edit or deliver. Safe to say it didn't last the night. Oh, finally, one of these I can contribute to. My mother was a wedding photographer till I was about 18, 19, and I helped out on many of them. The one that stands out the most was when we were at a campsite where both the wedding and reception were being held. About halfway through the reception, I hear the groom start laughing maniacally. I peeked over his way and could see 2 groomsmen hauling the thrashing and screaming bride towards the lake. They threw her into the freezing cold water with her veil and dress still on. When she got out of the water, I genuinely thought she might shoot somebody. Saying she looked like a drowned rat would have been an insult to rats. Her hair and makeup and probably the dress were ruined beyond repair. The fact that the groom laughed and didn't do anything stuck with me as being a dog shit move even as a teen. Apparently she thought so too because they didn't even make it 6 months. That's one of the most horrible wedding stories I have ever heard in my life. Not just because they threw her in the lake, but also because depending on the weight of the dress, the cuts of fabric and the depth of the lake, she could have easily drowned. I was thinking this. I helped my wife out of her dress once the night was over and was surprised with just how heavy that thing was. It would have been insanely heavy when wet. I can only imagine that the reason she walked out was due to the complete rage fueling her. I hope it wasn't a big, multi-layered dress. People have drowned that way. All that fabric soaks up all that water and gets super heavy and drags them down. If my groom did that, I would set the marriage license on fire in front of everyone and send them all home. Also, the whole cake is mine now. I once represented a guy who did this to his wife on their wedding day. Not in the divorce, but in his appeal for murdering a guy in the early 90s and beheading him. You'll be hearing from my lawyer for my whiplash injuries sustained from this post. This was 15 years ago or so. I left wedding photography a few months later. The reception was at their home. They didn't want photos at the ceremony and didn't want wedding party family photos between the ceremony and reception triggering the first raise of the eyebrow on my end. At the reception, the groom didn't want his brother, the best man, in the photos. Other eyebrow goes up. The mothers of both the bride and groom both scolded me to let them be and told me to eat instead of take photos. The groom and the best man got unholy drunk and had a weird by-play of brother, making way too many toasts, and the groom making grossly inappropriate speeches of what he's going to do to the bride on the honeymoon. As the newlyweds were making their grand departure, the bride tosses the bouquet. Everyone cheers. The groom shouts, "I knocked the bitch up so hard she's got 2 babies in her coochie." Guests react in various ways of shock and happiness about the pregnancy test, but the best man lunges at the groom, shouting and swearing. Family holds the best man back as the couple runs out to a car. The groom flipped off the spectators and pulled out of the driveway. 2 houses down, the car stops. The groom gets out and pukes on a neighbor's lawn. The bride gets in the driver's seat and takes off, leaving her husband yerking into a flower bed, and the best man ran down the street trying to flag down the car. Divorced 4 months later. What the fuck? I have so many questions. Did you ever find out what was going on there? Bride was such a monumental bitch. Her mum gave me a $500 tip for not walking out on the event when she was treating everyone, even her now husband, like a piece of shit employee. She did the whole clicking fingers thing when wanting someone to do something for her, and she berated the DJ for grabbing a sandwich when he'd been there for about 8 hours and was told that he should brought his own lunch and she would be taking the cost of the food like an open buffet style out of his paycheck. They were divorced within 3 years, but not before having 3 kids that have stupid names. Having 3 kids that have stupid names. Dear Hunter, go tell Dejiden and Roxana that dinner's gonna get cold. I'm pregnant with our first, and I'm now adding Deer Hunter to my list of name proposals. Not only does this add weight to the names I want my partner to lean towards, but also it would make him laugh. Riley, Slay. That reminds me, a college friend of mine, who at the time did a part-time waiter at the hotel, and here and there they held weddings too. At one such wedding, a guest kept clicking his fingers on him whenever he wanted something. This friend of mine came to him and told him in polite voice, "Do it one more time, and I break your fingers."
"What can I get you?"
He immediately stopped laughing. Wedding was on a golf course. Bride had a vision she wanted of her husband driving up on a golf cart to see her for a first look. He got one look at her from the top of the hill and vaulted the cart, ran down the hill, picked her up and twirled her around to tell her how gorgeous she was. We caught it all. It was the best first look ever. Once he set her down, she straightened herself and looked back to us. "Okay, I don't want that. Let's do the golf cart now." And she sent him back up. Wedding photographer from India here. Bride's mom dissed non-stop about the groom to a couple of our photographers. She believed that her daughter is too beautiful for the guy they promised her hand to, and how she'd rather have him die sooner than seeing him with her daughter post the wedding. Bride and the groom had the first dinner separately because the bride wasn't just in the mood to have their reception dinner together. This is the final nail in the coffin. Post the wedding, when we were about to photograph portraits of the couple, the groom walked up to us saying that he's too tired from the wedding, so it'd be better if we could use the photos from the previous weddings we shot and morph his face onto those and walked away. They divorced 3 months later. Holy shit, that last one. That is bonkers. Just deep fake me in boss. I'm tapped out. I was a bridesmaid in a wedding where the bridal couple left the reception, and as if on cue, all the bridesmaids started ugly crying. We'd all tried to talk the bride out of going through with marrying the demeaning, insecure Pauls, and couldn't hold back any longer. The bride's family came over to see what was wrong and just sadly nodded at us. It's been 35 years, and they are still locked in the most emotionally abusive relationship I've ever seen. So much potential happiness wasted. When the groom looked at her like she was the love of his life, and she treated the day like her prom and ignored him. I think they lasted 6 months. This was my wedding. He ignored me most of the reception, and I had to drag him onto the dance floor, but even then he only gave me a single song. I kept going around the wedding looking for him, and when I'd find him, he'd be in the middle of a conversation, and I'd have to just stand quietly behind him because he wouldn't fill me in on what they were talking about. At the end of the wedding, we had a send-off moment where everyone made an arm tunnel for us and cheered us on our way to the elevator. It was cute, but I felt his hand slip out of mine, and I turned around at the door to the elevator to see that he'd stopped a few feet back to talk to his friends some more. I looped my arm through his. Yet again, he didn't include me in their conversation, and stood there awkwardly rubbing his arm to try to get his attention. When I finally managed to get his attention, I think I cracked a joke to the whole group about we have to go consummate the marriage or it isn't legal. See, all at the after party. He raised his voice at me, saying that I was tearing him away from his friend. He had spent all day and night with his friends. I just wanted to take a turn. It was the most pathetic version of myself I've ever been. We lasted 4 years. I hope you're in a much better and happier place now. Oh, absolutely. I'd had self-esteem issues for so long at that point. Finding the courage to leave a man who didn't care about me was what finally cured me. It's amazing what we endure because of low self-esteem. Being that pathetic. I should have walked right out when he wanted to hang with his friends, who we hadn't seen in a while, instead of go on our honeymoon that night. I felt so degraded. We went to a bar with them, and even the band asked why we were there on our wedding night. I felt like crawling under the table. We lasted a single fight-filled year. I learned a lot about what I wanted and didn't want, though, and married a wonderful man a year later. We've been happily married for 33 years. Edited to say, I'm not innocent. I was not easy to get along with once the new wore off, gave as good as I got, and I was warned by others, his own actions, and even things he said long before we tied the knot. Fuck, that's sad. Groom didn't want to participate in any wedding pictures after the ceremony. I believe he was more interested in drinking beers with his buddies. I don't think they lasted a year. I went to a weird wedding like this. It was my wife's high school best friend's wedding. My wife's friend, in my opinion, is a wonderful person, very caring and smart, but suffers from a bad inferiority complex. She did the online dating thing for a while, and dated this stereotypical rich dude from a waspy family. He was a corporate lawyer. Absolutely did not mesh personality-wise with her. Forgot to mention my wife's friend also came from a very well-off family, but she never flaunted it or fit any of the stereotypes of a rich person. So they end up getting engaged, and every time we hung out as a group, I would struggle to find topics to talk with the guy about because all they wanted to discuss was baseball and the stock markets, 2 topics I couldn't care less about. So at the wedding, which was held at this very fancy venue in our city, they did the obligatory religious ceremony, walked around together and thanked people. But once the reception was going on, the groom literally hung out with his frat brothers the whole time. My wife's friend pretty much stayed glued to my wife and her other friends, and they danced all night. The only time the groom peeled away was to do the first dance thing together, and then he literally went back to broing it up with his friend. I even pointed the out to my wife during the reception, and my wife tried to steer her friend to her friend's now husband, but he would see them approaching and yell out he needed to grab some drinks for the guys and disappeared. This is the worst part. At the end of the wedding, the expectation is they would leave together, right? Nope. The groom said he and the guys were going to go out around town so he could say a final goodbye, and he will meet his wife at the hotel later. I was fucking blown away at what a horrible fucking match he was. Was this in... I swear we may have been at the same wedding. If not, it's sad how scary similar this story is. Worst part was at the end of the reception, the bride was going around asking everyone, have you seen my husband? And nobody had a clue where he went. No, up north, but sad to hear it's happened elsewhere. Oh man, I was a wedding photographer for about 5 years. I get being awkward on camera and not wanting to do any public power. I'm very awkward myself. But when prompting couples for fun poses, like whispering obscenities in each other's ear for a laughing shot, nuzzling close together, etc., most couples eventually let their guard down and enjoyed holding each other. It was so sweet. A few times, though, I had couples that visibly didn't want to be near each other at all. Once the shot was done, they went back to standing a foot apart. They would complain about each other and make fun of each other in front of each other in front of me. It always left me with a bad feeling in my gut, and most of the time the marriage didn't last long. Shooting the groom pre-ceremony, he gets a phone call. She did what? Pained expression, with a bit of a lip snarl and head shake, tone of sad resignation.
Well, did anyone call Susan?
I'm sorry. Long pause while the other person talks. I'm sorry. No, I can't say anything like that to her today. No idea what it was about, but he looked like he had a mix of this is my life now and contempt. They lasted a few weeks, and after splitting agreed to split all the remaining wedding bills. He paid his half. Then found out a year later that she never paid her half and sent me the rest. I sent it back and told him he'd already paid enough for that mistake. We still have a beer or round of golf every year or so, 20 years later. Good dude, bad judge of women. After 20 years, you've never asked him about that phone call, and he never mentioned what it was about. When I worked as a wedding planner for a hotel chain, the groom had found out his bride was having an affair with her brother's best mate. The bride's mother knew about it, but insisted on the wedding and paid a fortune. The groom wasn't drinking much, and at the speeches stood up and revealed he knew and said he was getting an annulment. He then took his best man on his honeymoon, the honeymoon the bride's parents had paid for. Likely no need. If the paperwork has not been submitted to the state yet, it hasn't legally happened. The preacher man asked us privately at the end of the night if we wanted him to submit. He said a couple once realized it was a mistake and opted to quietly cancel after the reception. No divorce or annulment needed. He gave them the paperwork and said it was up to them if they wanted to mail it in or not. A pretty down-to-earth preacher man, honestly. It's not gay if you make the ex-mother-in-law pay. If it rhymes, it's true. He then took his best man on his honeymoon, the honeymoon the bride's parents had paid for. I got to go on a honeymoon with my friend when his fiancée called off the wedding a week before. Was the heart-shaped bed comfortable? No, but there was a heart-shaped tub in the bathroom. We shared the bed, but not the tub. I'm a wedding photographer. Most of my couples are super awesome. Occasionally, couples are grumpy with each other during photos, and it's not a great look, but honestly, I like to give them the benefit of the doubt. Your wedding day should be a happy day, but sometimes it's just stressful. Stress can get to people and make them act in a way they normally wouldn't. I think the worst moment I witnessed was when a couple clearly didn't know each other very well. The guy made a comment about not knowing she had org during photos, and her mom whispered behind me, "You have no idea." I have no idea if they're still together. At the rehearsal dinner, every toast to the bride was some euphemistic variation of "I'm so glad you finally found someone to put up with your bullshit." They barely made it to the 6-month mark. I don't know why I found that so funny. I'm imagining they ranged from subtle jabs to like her brother just flat out saying it. "Derek, you're a great guy for marrying my sister. She is a complete bitch, and I'm begging you to leave her now or you will lose your soul forever. I have nothing good to say about her at all, and I can't believe I'm even here. Anyway, run now. If you choose to stay with her, well, you've been warned. Good luck." I'm not even joking. This is for real, bro. Owl, clap, clap, clap. Brittany, you are an insane bitch, and I pity this deluded man. I'll drink to that. The uncle who clearly started before he arrived. That man hasn't been sober for a decade, and I love him. Every wedding need one drunkle. Just so long as he's a fun drunkle and not a creeper drunkle. Gets groom's attention to the side. "Blake, there's 2 county mounties outside right now. If I were you, I'd take the escort out to here." From my own experience, I had 2 state troopers pull me aside at the courthouse. Since they had never seen a brown man turn chalk white, I was really nervous. Made it 25 years, and offered to escort me out of the county. Maybe they were all secretly hoping the groom would pick up on the red flags they were putting up. My ex could be a body double for Minnie Diva. Her sisters warned me she was nuts. Her father warned me. Her friends, her extended family all warned me. My family warned me. My family warned me. My friends warned me. Guess who did the stupid? I had a conga line of people telling me that my ex was trouble, so I am hardly innocent. The image in my head of a conga line of terrified family members made me spit my tea out. Run while you still can. Hey! Run and don't look back. Hey! It's not worth the pain. Hey! Hey! Oh, wow. Thanks so much for the golden awards, kind people. My brother's wedding was like that. Her family basically gushed about how much they love him, and were making comments about how they never thought she'd find someone who could handle her crazy. Her aunts actually came up to my mom and me and told us, if they divorce, we know it'll be her fault. I'm not a fan of his wife, but hearing her own family talk about her like that made me feel really bad for her. Lol, I was at a wedding like this. My cousin was mortified at the shit her new groom's buddies were saying, and everyone there could feel it. Lasted a few years, but she foolishly had a kid with him. Luckily for her, he died of pneumonia. Cause he was such a personality, he refused to see doctors for anything less egregious than a broken bone. People are so weird. It was Rishin poisoning. The maid of honor very drunkenly said in her speech for the groom to call her once the marriage was over. A couple of her friends said that in their speeches actually, and the best man told the bride the groom's phone lock code in his speech because she was going to need it. Those 2 last maybe a year. The bride ended up moving states for a new job, which made sense to me after seeing how shitty her friends and family were during that wedding. The other couple I can think of had 12 bridesmaids, groomsmen each. Yes, 24 people just in the wedding party. not including users, guest book attendant, flower girls, etc. The bride and groom belonged sorority fraternity at the same school. That's why there were so many people. The bridesmaids' groomsmen had all dated each other, and several of them had dated the bride and groom in college too, so it was a ton of fighting and drama the whole day. Those two lasted a while, I think 5 years, but the bride got pregnant on their honeymoon. I doubt they would have lasted a year if she hadn't gotten pregnant so quickly. Years after they broke up, I was invited to the bride's younger sister's bridal shower. They were family friends, and the Og bride got drunk on champagne and talked about how miserable she was planning her first wedding, and besides her daughter, it was the biggest mistake of her life, blah blah blah. That was fun, and it. For the confused comments, the last bride regrets the marriage, not the daughter. Sorry, I should have been more clear. She regretted getting married to her first husband wedding but not having her daughter. The daughter is in J High now, seems very happy and loved. Over coffee at our initial "do they want to hire me" meeting. They argued bitterly the entire time, and eventually the groom just sat back in his chair with his arms crossed and wouldn't speak to either of us. I went home and the next day emailed them the old something suddenly came up and that my schedule had unfortunately changed. Red flags aren't just for the people in the relationship, vendors. See them and heed them. There was a lot more, but at the wedding, the groom did cocaine and called bride's father a cocksucker in front of her friends. They didn't last a full year. I met with potential clients to go over the details of the wedding and to see if we would be a good fit to work together. I tried to schedule something at a cafe, but they insisted on me coming to their house. When I arrived, there was a 5-gallon Home Depot bucket of dirty diapers on the front porch. I had a feeling this wasn't going to go well. A young kid, probably 7 or so, answered the door. All I could see and hear were children running around everywhere. The soon-to-be husband was sitting on his bed that was in the living room, watching TV, and the bride was in the kitchen with 2 kids on either hip. She told me to sit at the kitchen table to go over the wedding detail. She shouted at her fiancé to come and join the meeting, where he didn't acknowledge that I was there to talk about shooting their wedding. The bride was annoyed, then asked if I saw the bucket full of dirty diapers on the porch. I said that I had, and she said her fiancé has so many kids with other women, that is the only place to keep them so they don't stink up the house. I did not take the job. I always wondered what happened to that couple. We are doing fine and have 2 buckets now. Mazel tov. She said her fiancé has so many kids with other women, that is the only place to keep them so they don't stink up the house, and yet she decides to marry him. Most people would consider those clues. Maybe being a babysitter is her life's passion. I knew a guy once who I believe was a genuine, actual psychopath. Incredibly charming right up until he turned terrifying. He had 4 kids by different women at the age of 22. I saw him once quite literally sneak one girlfriend out the back door while another was coming in the front. He started seeing a girl I knew from school. I told her what I knew. She knew about the kids and his somewhat criminal activities, but she stayed in total denial about the other women. She was utterly infatuated. Lucky for her, he had to skip town a few months later and was never heard from again. Poor kids. Asked the groom in a recorded interview why he asked her to marry him, and he said the pressure to get married. They lasted less than 2 months. Hadn't even finished the video and they were over. Early in my career, I filmed wedding videos. The interviews always give it away. By the end of the wedding, I usually have a pretty good idea of who's going to last and who won't, and it's proved out over the years. Any examples? The groom didn't want to put on his suit to take portraits, even after the bride insisted, because it's uncomfortable and hot. Different wedding saw the groom down an entire bottle of wine in one go when he finally had a minute to himself. I took the picture thinking it was just going to be a goofy moment, until later on, while I was editing pictures, I realized what I was seeing. Oh wait, another one. The bride was 30 minutes late. When I was in the room with the bride while she was getting ready, she told bridesmaids how her sister drove her all around town because she couldn't make up her mind about if she really wanted to get married. When the groom told the bride she couldn't have cake because she was overweight. Lasted a year, he gained weight. One of the bridesmaids cried the entire time from makeup to reception. Would have nothing to do with the groom. Kept wanting photos of just her and the bride. 8 months later, bride and groom are separated and she up and elopes with the bridesmaid. I used to be a wedding photographer in Las Vegas at several hotels and downtown wedding chapels. I've got so many of these stories. Here's a fun one. Monday, I get booked to shoot the wedding Wednesday. Hotel calls me to cancel because the bride backed out. Thursday, hotel calls to rebook me because wedding is back on. Same groom but different bride. Friday, I shoot the wedding with a new bride about 18 or 19 years old. Room was early 20s, and it's clear they barely know each other. Bride just kept saying, "This is so crazy, I can't believe I'm doing this." Neither could I. No, it wasn't a mail order bride. Here's a sad one. Older couple, I'd guess in their 40s, 50s. The limo driver calls and tips me off that the bride is being a problem. She arrives and is extremely rude to everyone on the staff, while the groom is being apologetic and super nice. The ceremony starts, and she fast walks down the aisle, doesn't wait for the groom. The groom sheepishly catches up at the altar. When it's her time to say "I do," she says "yay, whatever" in a bitchy, annoyed tone. The groom says "I do." You could cut the tension in the room with a knife. The minister keeps things in track and finishes the ceremony, and we get to the kiss. Instead of kissing the groom, she turns her face and gives him her cheek. She then fast walks back down the aisle, signs the paperwork, and left. The groom was in tears, never saw them again, and I'm sure it didn't last. Here's another. I would guess the bride was in her 70s, and the groom was in his early 20s. One side of the chapel was all walkers and oxygen tanks, while the other was drunk 20-something. Pretty sure it was a money grab, but it was notable because normally the genders are reversed on these kind of weddings. Another fun one. Wedding was at the top of the Stratosphere Tower. The couple shows up, and the bride is a new age crystal type, very, let's say, spiritual, and the groom straight up looks like a 1849 gold miner. Rope belt, floppy hat, 3 teeth, the whole thing. The bride tells me there would be spirits and angles in the photos, and the reason they got married at the Stratosphere is because it's the closest place to heaven that they could get married. They were so weird about it and said so many times that they wanted to be with God and go to heaven that the hotel had the bomb dog sniff them before getting on the elevator to go to the top. We lie and tell them it's standard practice to have the dogs sniff everywhere. Wedding happens, and they start chanting nonsense words, speaking in tongues. Then proceed to have the grossest makeout session I've ever seen. Turns out they met that week in a bath. That last one is gold, or possibly crystal. Her 3 kids from a previous marriage, 8, 9, and 12, were screaming their asses off and covering themselves in soda and overturning tables while making extremely hostile, profanity-laden demands for a drivable Hot Wheels car, and escalated to just randomly hitting people with baseball bats. Whole time, Mom was going, "Haha, aren't they so crazy? Oh, it's oak. They just get to express themselves." We unschool lasted a fake somewhere between 4 and 5 months. What the fuck is unschool? Edit. Oh, I looked it up. It's just neglect. My mother did this with me from 5th, 8th grade. I wasn't being taught anything and was extremely neglected, physically and emotionally abused. I was in a new school every single year from moving constantly, so it was easier for her to just not send me to school. I finally re-entered public school in 8th grade, even though I could have gone into 9th according to my age and where I should have been, and ended up dropping out permanently during 10th grade at 16, which my mother allowed. I dropped out partially because I felt so discouraged by my academic ability after being out of school for 4 years. Once I moved out at 17, I did end up getting my GED and graduated with an associate's degree a few years later. However, I am so fucked up over what happened and self-conscious about my educational history and overall mental capability. You should be proud of your achievements of overcoming that immense setback. It doesn't matter how long it may have taken, the fact that you pursued your own education of your own will, despite your past, speaks to the greatness of your perseverance. You're amazing. Keep at it. Not a wedding maternity photos. When the jokes about pushing each other off the cliff we were photographing on started sounding a little less jokey. They are co-parenting decently now after the restraining order ran out post-birth. I'm not a photographer, but I used to work with a wedding cake baker staging and setting up. It was always a bad sign whenever I saw the groom smash the cake into the bride's face during the first bite when she didn't. If they both did it, my boss never said anything, but if he did it to her and she hadn't done it to him at all, she would say it wouldn't work out. She had a pretty good track record.